This is C.R.P.H.A. Business Advocate. Today's topic is on White Castle. Now, from what I've seen of White Castle, even though I haven't been to the franchise, um, that I found that it has a particular interesting history, though, but it has a history that is unlike any other, really. Because many others have gone to the points of corporate, um, shall we say, corporate NASDAQ operations in the sense to where whatever the shareholder or stockholder wants, they have to do it. That whole thing should change. Because many people wonder, for one, is why do companies start, and then when they start getting successful, then they go to the points of becoming public, outside of being moderately private, if that. And then right when they hit the NYSE aspects, that 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 they basically are being essentially moderately sanctioned in order to get any financial backing or support from the New York Stock Exchange, again NYSE, um, outside of its general reason why it's around is to serve the general public, which basically has been said to be the main purpose, the main reason why they're around. Uh, and White Castle, I found that aside from its beginnings, which was in 1921, uh, which which is within the same year that Walgreens pharmacy or drugstore, if you will, is said to have been established. That the fast food chain is technically the one of the very first restaurants, or be that fast food franchises, that did start way before McDonald's, because what CNBC has not mentioned is that um, McDonald's started in '54, between the latter parts of '53 to '54. Um, be that by the McDonald's brothers. It was around the latter part of '54 to '55 that Ray Kroc um, put himself into a joint venture with McDonald's brothers. Although before Ray Kroc came into the picture, uh, that the McDonald's brothers had offers years, 2 separate years before, and or at least maybe a year and a half before at most. And one being, of course, according to the Founders movie, um, one being in Sacramento and one being in Arizona. And the one that's, again, according to the movie, that was uh, in Sacramento, it was said that in its beginnings of the particular location, although it wasn't really established exactly where in Sacramento, um, that they started selling burritos. aside from the fact that California is known as a multicultural state, and it's been known this, I'd say, since 1940, 1950. Because I know in the 1700s it wasn't really multicultural really at all. Um, but with that, they also had the joint venture with a person that opened one with the golden arches, the single arched design anyway, outside of Sacramento in Scottsdale, Arizona. Um, so generally, McDonald's didn't really start in '55 CNBC. Um, that was appropriated by Ray Kroc. He started his own first established franchise, paid through and supported by the McDonald's brothers in the moderate beginning of the joint venture that he had with the McDonald's brothers in 55. But um, White Castle has been the pretty much the only one that's even in records or even in knowledge or at current that stayed within the eastern part of the United States. And of course, on occasion, they did venture out, and they failed. They ventured out of the United States and failed. Of course, that was around a little after the fact that McDonald's and Burger King ventured out and went to the aspects of success. Um, but the one thing is that the White Castle corporate office has been set in such a way that they refuse to be franchised. They refuse to extend beyond their known and comfortable comfort zone, if you will, of control of the company. And with that, they did not really go to the points of public, just like In and Out didn't go public. Um, but outside of In and Out, though, In and Out started basically pretty much in the same general, shall we say, coastline, or not coastline, but um, the general same state as, say, Taco Bell. And of course, McDonald's joined in eventually within the same fast food um, lineup in the state of California. But McDonald's started in San Bernardino, California. It didn't start in Illinois, although Ray Kroc opened one of his first ones in the back east area of that. Uh, the In and Out started in a small cube, practically like a mid-sized Kit Kat, if you will, or even uh, a general boxed-in effect, built setup of where they had an over like a plastic or metal overhang painted of where they'd be able to have and where the roadway would be, where vehicles would be able to pull in, and they'd be able to get their order, and that was it, and then be able to be on their way. And it was a fairly small and a wide open area that could have easily built up from that small thing. They had enough room for it, but of course, in order to do that, they'd have to buy more land, and of course, the founders of In and Out didn't want to go that way. Uh, but eventually it did stay within the family. It did stay within the family, just like White Castle. And it still is within the family, from what I gather. And it stayed a private company. It's still staying a private company, even with the numbers of locations that it has, even at current, and has built up to have. And with that, it's lost a number of its family members along the way. Outside of its founders, of course, its founders passed on. I'd say maybe a few years or so before one of its family members died in a plane crash. Um, Although many people believe that have believed anyway, that In and Out is more of a Christian, religious type of company franchise. Although there was no mention of it in any of its business, shall we say, you know, mentions of In and Out. And even Hugh Hauser, before he passed away, he did a an episode or a video of that, of, of its beginnings and such like that. And there was no mention of it having any religious connection with even within the family. The family did not mention that, although if they could have, but they didn't. So basically, you can't really say that In and Out or is essentially religiously connected in any form or sense. Um, but outside of that, as I said, White Castle was one of many of the first ones that started back east around the same time, and then within the same year that Walgreens again is said to be said to be started or established in 21, uh, in 1921. That is, and for a time outside of it staying within the eastern side of the United States and basically not only just literally having a steady footprint in the East Coast. Um, and before it went to its fourth generation, it expanded outside the U.S., failed, came back, So essentially, now with even before the fourth generation, they went into Orient, if you will, being Japan or wherever in that sense. Again, the Orient, and it its low cost aspect, as it's claimed to have, is a lot more than its now known competitors, be that, of course, the widespread chains that we know today, being, of course, McDonald's, Burger King, and such like that. Although In and Out's really not a widespread chain as much as as much as McDonald's, Burger King, Carl's Jr., Wendy's, and several others. Uh, but In and Out, as well as White Castle, have a general connection in the family aspect of staying within the family. There's no separation from the family in any way, and in fact the granddaughter of In and Out is, or probably still is, or was at one point, the president after being CEO, and the fourth generation of White Castle is currently, according to CNBC, especially, is the president of the corporation of the franchise of White Castle. And many people who watch that one Stoner movie had that, and it's, I guess, the last part of the name is Kumar anyway. Um, um, they show that they went into a White Castle. White Castle essentially um is in a big time support of that movie, even even after its release. Although it is not really sound for for a business of any sort to be positively connected or even in support of one that promotes marijuana. Um, but of course they do support it due to the fact that have they had one of their locations in the movie. Um, but outside of that, of course, the White Castle eventually went into the aspect of retail marketing in such a way that they put into in like the 1980s or late 80s, really, in that sense. They put in their sliders, their famous burgers, which of course, I think it was Carl's Jr. or something, some other chain franchise tried to copy their mini burger thing there, and which basically Carl's Jr. can be sued for that. Um, and of course, the Ultimate Burger is another one, which basically Carl's Jr. can be sued for that as well, or any other company or franchise can be sued for it that follows that same namesake if White Castle were to go that direction. Because it's said that White Castle not only being the first one to come up with that one, but they were also the first ones to come up with the sliders, and it's in its moderate beginnings. It had some issues of its own when it came to with World War II, I believe, or one, that they had a situation with a lack of um, product in the sense to where they lost money extremely. Um, but after they were able to build themselves back up, and with even the bad publicity of red meat, the hamburger meat essentially, uh, for in its beginnings, that the founder made it his mission to um, to essentially promote the aspect of the hamburger uh, to where it's not a as bad as long as you don't eat it too much, which basically is still the concept even today. Um, the other aspect of it is that which doesn't really connect, but the White Castle name was essentially the white part of it, anyways, is supposed to be presenting or promoting in sense of cleanliness. You could have any name, even Blue Castle, Red Castle, whatever else, and still be known as a clean establishment, a well clean establishment. Um, but the one thing was is that for a time, White Castle again stayed within its um, general um, comfort zone, and then like after it failed in the many years after it failed in the Orient, and then went back in eventually before the fourth generation, and then went to the point of succeeding the second time around. It only went into the retail market of selling its product of the sliders in supermarkets, which was its first, shall we say, expansion in a sense. But its actual expansion started within the two states of Arizona and Nevada. But equal to In and Out, they are staying private and they are not going to the points of being pressured by any stockholder or shareholder, and they're opening locations at a way more than a steady pace. And basically, that can be one of many strategies that can keep any company around longer. In fact, I promote that as a business advocate in alone. I promote that you could easily, many companies could go to the points to where they don't have to deal with the shareholders and stockholders, even within the NYSE, uh, or any other aspect connected to that, and they don't have to franchise to the points to where they feel that they have pressure outside the NYSE, especially in the franchising aspects of things. Um, basically, I'd say, in a business sense, both In and Out as well as White Castle are right in the right state of business concept and business sense, especially in today's economy. Um, and it was still a good business practice, even with the economy that we had even during the Obama administration, because many other companies lost out in the Obama administration economic standing. Um, and we all already know that. Um, but White Castle, even in the administration of the Trump administration economic standing, it is still a good, safe, and stable practice to not have any stockholders and shareholders breathing down your neck, metaphorically, especially, and not to be going to the points of public or corporate or even fully established as a corporate, but like in the sense of like a public company of sorts. And basically, I can see if they go this way continuously, no matter how many generations take over, it's more than sufficient to say that they will last even beyond the 21st century, even the 22nd century, be that of course the 23rd on up. But sadly, and I'm being realistic about this, sadly, each generation has a different concept, or a different visual aspect, or visual acuity of many things, as we know this, right? And that could be more than detriment to a company that's lasted as long as both In and Out as well as White Castle, among others. And but CNBC is right about one thing though. Many companies that go into the family connection of even a startup, they don't last even before the third, if not second generation. It depends upon how it's operated and essentially run and operated, basically same thing. And where it's the economic stature, even from its first beginnings, is done and appropriated. We Many business people know this, but not very many of them are going the way that White Castle as well as In and Out have gone, to the point of being completely outside the NYSE, completely outside of having the shareholders and stockholders breathing down their necks. And why many companies, even before, I'd say McDonald's, and say like for example Long's, right, Payless, Walgreens, um, and a number of others in the retail concept, they've been talked into in the early aspects, in the early moderate beginnings especially, to go public. Therefore, they thought it was a good idea at the time, but yet they've had pressures upon pressure upon pressure upon pressure, mainly directly from the stock shareholders and the NYSE, and also therefore they've had to scale back a number of times. But In and Out as well as White Castle haven't had to do that. The only thing that they did scale back on was due to the landscape change in various locations, which basically is surrounded by various former locations. They've had to, as any business does, um, scale back in the sense of closing those locations because they're not as easy or basically easy to get to, essentially, due to say a restructure of roadway, be that of course from highway to and or regular regular pathway of road essentially, and that eventually turns into a freeway surrounding. And many, even in California, have had that issue as well, where they're like right alongside the freeway. And with that, they're not, unless you're in the inner part of the city, unless you're going within that particular part of the town, that's where they have a hardship, in the sense that where they have low numbers of foot traffic. And come to think of it, even that's where White Castle, if not also In and Out Burger, could easily succeed beyond its known competitors, be that the wide chains of of McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, and various others. Although Wendy's has its own issues, aside from it being a moderately mid-sized chain of its own, and still being dealt with by the NYSE and its stock and shareholders, which they can easily pull out of in order to succeed. And yet, I'd say if Wendy's were to pull out of the NYSE and become private, but still a chain nonetheless, right? They'd be able to exceed the competitors that it's third or fourth behind. Now, that's one thing Wendy's needs to think about. But with White Castle, they could lose out because even with the next number of generations, depending on how successful it is, even before the fifth and sixth and whatnot generations, um, even if it was instilled into the next generation that will take over, that next generation can have a completely different view of and for and about the company and its longevity, which basically could easily still, depending on what it is, even for the time, can be more than detriment to the company and its general, even current success. Um, so it's hard to exactly say exactly right now of how long the success, even with the fact that it's within Nevada, as well, I believe it's Las Vegas, and Arizona. Um, how long they would be able to keep it that far away from its main connection, be that of course back east, and its main startup, and yet for a time the two CEOs and presidents before the granddaughter, before the fourth generation being the granddaughter, they made it a more than a mission statement, to keep the company within its own surroundings within the eastern side of the United States. That they felt it was better controlled and better established in in the operation aspect outside of having to go to the west and still being able to have a very strong hold on and control on its franchises and its franchise locations especially. Um, but the when White Castle did start doing the expansion, it they were approached by people that, as they said, they had sufficient, um, you sufficient things that White Castle essentially found legible and logical. Therefore, they tried it. They failed, as I said earlier. And then when they tried again, they went to the points of one, and they may be more now, uh, but the one thing is that the low cost aspect in the Orient is not the White Castle norm in pricing. which basically they could lose out compared to McDonald's and the other fast food chains within the same surrounding within the overseas concept. Um, which basically would put White Castle back to stay steady in the U.S. And it's not clear exactly if In and Out would might try that, or if they have, and if they fail. Um, but hopefully they don't have to go there because things can change in any given way, concept, and what have you else. And it's been shown that way with many retailers and many other businesses. Of course, I know Walmart's going to have one of its fair share of economic downfall in the overseas concept. So basically, that if they don't if they don't pull out soon of the out of overseas, then they could easily lose out way more and way more drastically than say Payless did when Payless tried to expand to the Hawaiian Island market at a very late time within its operation in history. Before they sold themselves to Rite Aid, which of course Rite Aid is having a hard time even at current. Um, um, Even outside of the aspect of selling a percentage of their locations to Walgreens, which Walgreens essentially, like I said and have said before, that Walgreens essentially changed the whole look of the buildings and the ones that they didn't fuck with, the ones they didn't mess with essentially. Um, they closed. They bought them and closed them. The ones that they did use, they put signage up and eventually closed. Who's to say if there's any of them that they kept open and still in operation? The one thing is that also is that White Castle still has the right idea, but they have to expand on their retail supermarket sales um, of doing something of outside the slider aspect, the hamburger slider things, the miniature hamburgers anyway. Um, or because even just having one particular thing that they are well known for can lose popularity to the where they lose money a lot quicker and a lot sooner than they may expect, or they can completely pull out altogether of the retail market concept, which basically could easily make it to where they lose out in the economical financial base, which they may do unless they can come up with another aspect that would be able to even go along with their the slider um, hamburger concept that they have in many grocery markets uh, across the United States anyway. Um, but again, you could say that they may decide to eventually pull out of that unless they come up with something fairly quick. Because from what I've seen, is that at least within the areas that I've been at, the slider concept is losing out pretty quick. Where it's not really that well of a that popular of a variety of shall we say frozen food aspects. Of course, whoever works at or for White Castle could bring that up. Uh, and outside of that, the current aspect is that aside from its beginnings, of White Castle. They could also get rid of the castle concept, but still be known as White Castle. You know, because their architecture can cost them a pretty penny, uh, even in the signage aspect as well as the logo. They could still be called White Castle by name, but the imagery could be a little different than what it's what its beginnings started out with. Although its beginnings wasn't in the actual shaping of a castle top edge, as many people know. In its very beginnings, it the founder, essentially the main founder, worked at what would be known even today as a hamburger stand outside the carnival or fair concepts of hamburger stands. Um, and eventually, the founder bought out the company that the founder worked for, essentially, and the was reestablished in a different state back east. And basically, it went from gradual success from that point on. And to start out with, is that it didn't connect with the NYSE or even franchising, or even stock and shareholder aspects and whatnot, or even concept. And I don't foresee them changing that concept, although they could. But it might be known to be a something that would pull them down versus rise them up. But also, as I said, Wendy's can reestablish themselves in that same concept, and basically possibly go into at least number one and a quarter or number one and a half next to McDonald's. Because of course Wendy's has been bitching and moaning on me in a business sense of always being the one that's not well known or well trafficked, if you will, in the sense of foot traffic for many of its locations, even outside their breakfast concept, which basically is still not a popular thing. And in the aspect of the breakfast concept, um, if White Castle were to do that, they'd have to do it in such a way that they would know that they would not lose their normal customer base, and with that, I think that's another part where Wendy's lost out, is that they wanted to innovate just to compete with the known competitor. I mean, yeah, Subway has tried it and they failed in the breakfast concept. And Taco Bell tried it, failed. Same concept in breakfast. And Burger King tried it for a time, eventually gradually backed out of that. The only one that has succeeded in that aspect and concept is the Golden Arch from McDonald's. Be that, of course, they started a lot sooner than the known competitor. In many ways, also, it's a good thing that both In and Out as well as White Castle have not reached that point because they may not have the economic as well as financial backing. You need to have a very steady, more than a very steady base of customization in order to feel that they may have enough to go into the next concept, be that breakfast or whatever. And that's where Wendy's needs to also look through. But if White Castle again were to do it, as well as In and Out, they'd have to have knowledgeable aspects and say, well, if we went into the breakfast concept, we would definitely have the same economic customization, and yet Wendy's thought the same thing, but yet they lost out. What was it? Carl's Jr. thought the same thing. They had it for a time. I should know this because I tried their breakfast burritos. And they were about like that big around. It was good though. But yet they kind of scaled back. Um, when Wendy's tried it, as well as Subways and various other locations, as well as Taco Bell, they did it in such a way that they lost out. The customization was not very, shall we say, steadfast, or uh, or even fully known to be established in the sense where they'd be getting business for that variety in within their menus once they added it in there. They didn't do even what's known as a test out with various locations, whether it be the locations closer by their corporate office or further away from the corporate office. Whoever was able to, even the franchisees, um, uh, didn't go into it fully, but yet they tried it out due to the support and backing of the corporate office. But yet, when the corporate office found that there was not that much of a success in that, then eventually only so little of the franchisees kept it going for a time. Namely, one of them being Wendy's. And then they kind of scaled back again. But White Castle could try it in their slider concept, much like they're doing in the overseas concept of their regular hamburger type sliders in the sense of having tofu meat in their slider concept. They could try it as a breakfast concept of if they were to do like the image of their version of the egg McMuffin, if you will, or the breakfast burrito, but and or even the any other breakfast concept that even McDonald's has a popular customization economic standing with, but they can do it in such a way that they don't go to the points of fully copying everything that McDonald's did and has done. Because when you do that, you can easily be sued. Um, so you could say so. All in all, good work, good work on keeping the way things have been, but for White Castle as well as In and Out, um, but again, the next generation might have a totally different concept, and yet they may feel that it's ready, but really it's not. So that's one thing to watch for. One of many things to watch for, really. So essentially, if you have any questions on this, since of the White Castle or In and Out or any one of the ones I mentioned, please let me know in the comment section below, and or on Business Advocate um, on Facebook, on our Facebook page. of CBA Business Advocate on Facebook, and we may do another one depending on exactly if there's any new innovations or alterations or what have you within any number of the retailers as well as franchises. This is C.R.P.H.A. Business Advocate, CBA, essentially. We want you guys to stay safe and stay strong, especially in this pandemic situation that we're dealing with in 2020. Uh, we at CBA, C.R.P.H.A. Business Advocate, wish all the best for White Castle to start with the fact that this video is on and about White Castle directly. Um, and we will be in support of their celebration once they hit their 100th anniversary birthday celebration in 2021. This is again CRPHA Business Advocate. Have a good day.